arms as you breathe out. Okay, now to add to this effect, we can add in some guided imagery. For example, picture yourself, your feet are on the ground. Say you're on a bench at the beach, and your feet are in the sand. And while you're sitting there, you're listening to the waves as they come up on the shore. The seagulls are in the background. A little breeze in your ear. A little breeze. And you feel it on your skin as well. A little bit of sun on your face. Feel the warmth from the sun and the breeze on your body and in your ear. And you hear the sound of the breeze in your ear, along with the seagulls in the background and the sound of the waves coming up on the shore. And you breathe in. Take a deep breath. And when you take that deep breath, don't constrict it. So you're breathing in, but you're not restricting your lungs. In other words, you're not restricting it to your lungs. That's what I'm trying to say. You're allowing it as a deep breath, a diaphragmatic breath, which means that as your lungs expand, your diaphragm stretches outward and therefore pushes into the abdominal cavity, and you allow your abdominal cavity to expand outward as well, or to move outward. So you should have a little bit of the abdomen pooching out. It's not anything to be vain about or that sort of thing. It actually helps the process. So I'll do this again. Deep breath in. Allowing it to gradually seep out. Thinking about being at the beach and the waves, feeling the soft sand beneath your feet, hearing the seagulls and the sound of the breeze and the waves, and relaxing. Your eyes may even feel a little heavy as you relax. It's okay. You can let them close. Now, a lot of you are going to have trouble doing, that was one breath for me. That lasted, what, a minute or two. You may have trouble doing that because you're not used to this. But with practice, you can get better at it. And you can make that breath in and hold that breath for longer and longer time period. And also breathe out more slowly and gradually. But you're not pushing it out. Say you're letting it seep out. That allows more oxygen to be retained in your body, going into your bloodstream, and alkalinizing your body, reducing the acidic nature of stress, the inflammatory nature of stress. So you reduce the inflammation in your body by getting more oxygen. Deep breathing and relaxing. Okay. So that was a nice little exercise, and we can practice it some more. Maybe we'll do some more toward the end of the show today. All right, so there are a lot of ways that we deal with stress. Some of us vent. We get irate or excited, or even sometimes, if we don't know how to deal with the fact that it's our own stress, we might have difficulty expressing ourselves in a positive way.
What about when other people bring stress into your life? How do you avoid that?
Well, you can't avoid that. You're going to have stress in your life. In today's world, we're all stressed, especially in the United States, where we don't have a lot of things that help us out in life.
Everybody's wanting to do too much.
Yeah.
Should have heard.
And, the United States is the most productive society in the world, supposedly, right? And why is that? Well, because everybody works maybe too hard. And why is that? Well, maybe because that's the only way we can survive in this society, because that's the way it's set up. Where are our taxes going to? I could get all political here, right? But, you put tax money in all your life, and yet you drive around on streets that are rocky and full of potholes, or not in great shape, bridges falling into the water, these kinds of things. We see homeless people all over, right? A lot of them have psychological disorders and potentially could be institutionalized or helped in other ways. But the programs may not be in place for a lot of these people. And why is that? Because the funding is not there. And why is the funding not there? Because the tax money doesn't go to it. It doesn't go to those programs. It doesn't go to improving the streets in a fashion where we have decent streets everywhere. No. We've got this catch-up mode kind of thing going on. It's more of a reactive way of running everything. And the same with our lives and our society. I am getting political here, Billy. We're not taking care of our people. We're not taking care of our people. The United States does not take care of its own. Other countries have social programs in place. They've been in place a long time. We used to be more like that, but there was a big switch that got turned back in the 80s, actually, more specific. And a lot of these social programs got cut. A lot of people were then out on the streets. We have all of these kinds of phenomena that resulted from the way this country has been managed, and has been managed for a lot of the time since then, that have ended up with many people under huge amounts of stress, with the inability to recover from financial issues, emotional issues, psychological issues, etc. And yet we have no balancing of, well, some balancing, but no significant balancing of the levels of taxation relative to income. Yes, I could get into a big argument here, I'm sure, especially with the tax accountants that are listening to me right now. But we just aren't investing properly in our own people, is the way I look at it. And so we have to deal with this stress as a result of our lives, the work we do, the amount we have to handle all the time, the amount of things that we're facing on a daily basis, all of the problems that come our way every day, that are very unhealthy for us, very damaging, very aging. All of the stress, all the cortisol that's being produced as a result of the adrenal function, the fight or flight response. It's like every day we're running into 100 bears in the woods. And every one of those bears we've got to face and take on. And then we run into another bear. Or it might be more like coyote or, we have coyotes running around the same feet evidently. But, we have this way we've been built, essentially, the way we are programmed, the way we are designed as a system, our bodies, is based on the people we used to be, where we did live in the wilderness, we did live in jungles or caves or things like this, but out in the wilderness dealing with these kinds of threats that were serious threats to our lives on a daily basis. Well, not on a daily basis, but it's more like we're dealing with it on a daily basis in our current society. And our body's programmed to see all of these threats as equivalent, essentially, to the bear in the woods. Our bodies are designed that way. So when we have these stressors on a daily basis, we're constantly getting that fight or flight reaction. And the breakdown on that, I'll get into after our break. I'll take a little break. But the breakdown in terms of mechanically what's going on. We have a lot of hormonal responses going on. We have the effects on our metabolism. These kinds of things we'll talk about very shortly. So you're Everybody's got stress in their lives in this country. It's craziness. You know, in the United States, most people get maybe, anywhere from a week to 2 weeks vacation every year, if they're lucky. Some people have accumulated by working their tails off for a decade or two at a corporation, maybe as much as 4 weeks. And this is like a common thing. 4 weeks is minimal in Europe. I mean, there's months where people aren't working and they're taking their time, they're enjoying their lives and this kind of thing. But in the United States, that's not the standard. The standard is to work everybody to death, basically. And that's the stress. That's what stress does to us. And there's a level we can get so deep on what this stress is doing to us. Like if we look at telomeres. Telomeres are a sort of a tail on your DNA. It's the material that is used by the DNA to reproduce the cells, right? And those telomeres are used up over time. But we see acceleration of telomere shrinkage with stress. I've seen personal incidents where I've measured telomeres for patients. I had a couple of patients. One was the mother of this young lady. Young lady's autistic. The young lady was 31 years old, physiologically, right? Chronologically, I should say. Chronologically, 31. But she had the telomeres of a 9-year-old. 31 years old, telomeres of a 9-year-old. Why is that? Well, she's sort of in her own world to a certain extent. She doesn't have to deal with the stressors in her life. Her mom deals with those. Now, her mother, at the time of measuring that, was 57 years old. Yet her telomeres were those of a 75-year-old woman. So that's a huge gap, and that's the effect of the stress that came with her situation, with raising this young lady who's in her own world and having to deal with her responses to various situations, sometimes violent responses, sometimes harming herself. All of these kinds of situations that she would be dealing with throughout that time period affected her telomeres at that level. And we're talking chromosomal level, inside all of her cells. That's how deep this issue is. Very, very deep issue. That's how much this stress is affecting us. Then we get into our normal responses, which for some people can be worse than others, partly because of habits. And I'll explain that. So the normal response, the fight or flight response to a stressor, is what we experience. We've got adrenaline pumping, we've got cortisol pumping in response to that threat. The cortisol comes in various forms. We have mineral corticoids and we have glucocorticoids. When we get the glucose response, in other words, the cortisol causes us to convert stored sugars in the form of glycogen into glucose. We end up with glucose heightened in our bloodstreams. So we're getting a response of higher blood sugar. So we get a spike in blood sugar. What's that going to do? Well, we also have this hormone called insulin. The insulin rushes in, grabs all that sugar, pulls it up into our muscles and this kind of thing, and then drops the sugar level. Well, if we get all this spiking on a regular basis, what's happening is it's like it actually will create insulin resistance. So stress can create insulin resistance, which can lead to diabetes. And so what we're doing is we're going in this cycle where we are high in blood sugar, then lacking in blood sugar, high in blood sugar, lacking in blood sugar. And when that happens, all that insulin is very damaging to our bodies, adding further damage due to the insulin response, reducing the oxygen transfer from our bloodstream into our muscles. So that therefore damages and ages muscles and weakens our muscles. And we can end up with a lot of issues because of this response. Well, also the low blood sugar that can be created after the high blood sugar because of the insulin rushing in. That low blood sugar is going to create a situation where the brain is low in sugar. The brain runs on sugar. The brain runs on glucose. So we have about a third of the sugar used in our body is used in our brain. So if that brain level of sugar gets very, very low, then that itself is a stressor on the body. So the response is to get the body to react. You get shakes, you might get dizzy, things like this. It's telling your body, and it's telling you that you need sugar, that you need food. So this is also involved in a reaction which can be hypoglycemia. You see, that's the low blood sugar. But if it's a chronic issue, the individual can become hypoglycemic. Yet this can lead to diabetes as well. So we have lots of issues that can come from the stress response. Okay, we have the cortisol increasing, causing issues with blood sugar. The rush in of insulin in response to the heightened blood sugar can lower the oxygen in our bodies, going to our muscles and our tissues. And we end up with, many other issues like diabetes, hypoglycemia. And a lot of this causes damage to our blood vessels as well. So as seen in diabetes, quite often we have issues related to the cardiovascular system, and we can have blindness as an end result there because of the elevated blood sugar and the damage to the veins and even the retina, potentially. There's all of these kinds of things affecting our health. And all of it starts with stress. The AMA, I've got a quote, I don't recall exactly when, but the AMA stated years ago that all disease, 80 to 85%, I should say, of all disease is caused by stress. 80 to 85%. Now that's an interesting statement. And, I haven't seen the studies on that to make that kind of statement that we're drawn into that statement. However, it at least states that stress is a serious issue. So we have this serious issue we're confronted with every day in the form of many daily issues, many daily stressors. And it's hard to get your mind trained to understand that this is just the way it is, and that you need to do things that compensate for the amount of stress you're getting in your life and not be reactive about the stress. We need to be proactive about stress. Quote me on that. We need to be proactive about stress. We need to do work to help us compensate for the amount of stress in our lives. And that work can be very positive work, like on ourselves. And there are many areas like mindfulness, meditation, focusing on one thing, and basically ignoring or letting other things go to the wayside as you focus on that one thing. It can be music, it can be a sound, it can be watching a movie, it can be many things that relate to changing our focus, altering our focus. And it's not a state of ignoring, it's a state of awareness. One becomes more aware with the practice of meditation. And in a way, I mean, I've experienced this to some extent in my life. Meditating has helped me be able to deal with stress, even when I'm very stressed, in such a way that I don't necessarily react to the stress. You know, sometimes maybe I do, but it's helped me be improved at dealing with the stress on a daily basis. I have less reactivity and more perspective. And that's a piece of what we need, I believe. We need more perspective on everything we encounter. So one lovely little question is, how much will this matter in 10 years? You know, you're dealing with this stressful issue today. Will this really matter in 10 years? Is it something that I really need to see as this life-threatening bear in the woods? Or is it more like a speed bump on the road? And another addition to that perspective, I think, is something that Stephen Covey, the writer of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, talks about. He talks about prioritizing, essentially, breaking up importance and urgency into 4 quadrants. Is it important and urgent? How many of those issues come across your desk or your life or your day? Are they important and urgent? Or are they just important but not urgent? Or are they urgent but not so important? Or are they even not important and not urgent? If you categorize your encounters on a daily basis in those 4 quadrants, it can help with what I was referring to as perspective. It helps with your perspective during your day, encountering all of the stressors in your day. You gain perspective by having that framework to test against, to help you deal with the stressors and to know how to categorize them, to then figure out which ones are most needed to be addressed and which you may be able to just let them go for a while. So as I'm going through my day, I'm prioritizing like that continuously. And sometimes I have to shift gears. Sometimes I have to bring something to the front. And there are things that I may put off for a while, or I may delegate. That's another possibility. If you can delegate, and it's something that you know somebody else can handle, and yet it's kind of in the way of making progress for you, that's another option. You know, and there's another part to all this. In the United States, a lot of people pride themselves on multitasking. Multitasking is like carrying a bunch of balls at one time and trying to keep them all in the air, right? You know, so you have to be quite a juggler, and it's very stressful at times, you know. So there's multitasking, but then you can have monotasking. I don't know, I just came up with the term. But monotasking would be more of dealing with one thing at a time. Maybe prioritizing, as I mentioned with the grid, you know, important and urgent, or just important, or just urgent, or neither. Deciding based on those kinds of factors what your approach needs to be. And then we have these other riding things that ride us, and maybe in the back of our minds, right? Like judgments. Maybe we were raised in a judgmental family, or maybe we've taken on judgments from society, or, you know, maybe we're having run-ins with somebody who's telling us you know, you're a piece of crap or something like that, right? Basically, that kind of viewpoint interferes with our clarity of thought and our ability to manage the things that come our way. So if we take on those kinds of judgments, you know, if you hear yourself using the word should a lot, step back and look at it. If you're saying something should be a certain way, is it really a should? You know, is it something that is like a physical law? Physical laws, yes, should be a certain way, right? You know, Newton and the apple, right? You know, you throw an apple up in the air, it should fall to the ground, right? That's a should. However, what if you threw the apple up in the air and it hit a branch on the tree and then bounced off the branch on the tree and then, you know, landed on a trampoline and then bounced up into the air and so on? You see what I'm saying? So even there, it could go another way. So that word could can be used quite often to substitute for the word should, or it would have been better if, or it might work out better if, or, you know, so many variables from should. That word should is a cue letting us know there's judgment involved. So if you're going through your daily routine and things come up in your day where you're saying to yourself, I should have done this better, or I should have done it a different way, or this should not be happening to me, but it is, guess what? It should be happening to you. Because it is. And it is because it should. Because of something that happened during that day that led to that. That is also a should. You see? So we have our shoulds, we have our coulds, or woulds, or would be better if. We don't have to judge. We don't have to allow ourselves to be judged in our own minds. Now, people may have their opinions. Everybody has an opinion, right? You know, you were raised with your parents' opinions. You may have opinions with your kids. But if it's turned into judgment, then we have this other kind of riding source of stress, because we're always measuring ourselves against that line, that judgment. So that's something else to consider, is this kind of tape running in your head that makes you feel like you're never good enough, or you're not doing enough, or it's not, you know, you're not doing the job right, or these kinds of things. If you have those kinds of things going on, you need to learn to detach from it and to understand you can substitute for that should with a could, or it might be better if, or would have been better if, and use it as a learning tool, a discovery, instead of a mistake. Mistake implies some judgment, doesn't it? Perhaps it's a discovery. Another source may come from looking back and thinking that you should have done something differently from the way that you did, looking into the past. You know, a lot of people go around bashing themselves for mistakes, quote unquote, that they've made in their lives. Well, again, reframed as a discovery, now we have something we can learn from and grow from. And my way of looking at it overall for myself is kind of a takeoff from something used a lot in industry, which is total quality management. Total quality management has this philosophy called Kaizen, which is a Japanese term, but basically it's a Zen term, but it's about self-improvement, you know, and it's continuous improvement, really. Continuous improvement of processes, continuous improvement of things that are made, products. I see it as continuous self-improvement. You know, some people think I just like to collect degrees. Well, it's more about learning more and continuing to improve as an individual and being able to provide more tools and more help, more ability to handle different situations, these kinds of things. So it's about continuous self-improvement. And if we see these things that we go through as opportunities for self-improvement, as discoveries in, oh, I didn't realize I did that kind of thing. That's something I could change. Notice I said could change, not should change. It's an opportunity. And so our stressors can be learning tools, can be tools for growth and for self-improvement. So quite often, stressors are opportunities to reframe or to come up with a new paradigm, a new model for how to be as an individual. New things, new challenges that can be handled in a new or different way can help us with growth as an individual and can help others if we're actually solving a problem that affects other individuals. Okay, so I waxed philosophical there, but there are lots of ways we can deal with stresses, basically what I'm saying. And we can learn a lot from the stressors in our lives. We can learn a lot and make discoveries on a daily basis about how we can improve as individuals. So I promised that I would do some more practice of some deep breathing toward the end of the show today. So now's a good time. Let's go ahead and try some deep breathing again. So if we take a deep breath in through the nose and out through the mouth, not pushing the breath out, but allowing it to seep out, and trying to hold the breath in after breathing it in. Hold it, at least for a few seconds. Hold it in your lungs and allow that oxygen to get through the lungs into the pulmonary vessels, into your cardiovascular system. That oxygen goes into your blood and alkalizes your body, helping to relax your body, possibly relaxing your heart rate or your heartbeat, your pulse, and kind of giving you a new perspective on the day. It really can help with that. It really helps to de-stress. In fact, for individuals that have heart rate problems, that have palpitations or tachycardia, these kinds of things, one of the tools that I share is deep breathing. You know, if somebody's stressed to the point that it's raising their heart rate, de-stressing is very important, and this is one of the tools that can be used. So deep breathing, breathing in through the nose, and again, integrating that part that I added to this deep breathing, which is taking your arms and raising them as you breathe in, and then lowering them as you allow the air to seep out. Allowing your lungs to fill to capacity when breathing in, removing the arms from the torso and spreading them away. Okay. And then as you breathe out, once you breathe deeply in, and dropping the arms as you breathe out, and allowing it just to seep out. And then integrating into that some imagery. And I'm not just talking visual imagery, imagery with all of the senses, where you can smell the salty air sitting at the beach. You feel the sand beneath your feet sinking into the sand. You hear the waves and the seagulls and the little bit of breeze that's catching your ear as you feel the breeze on your body. You see the waves in your mind rushing up to the shore. Maybe even tasting the salt in the air. All of those senses can be brought into your experience as you're breathing in and breathing out. Breathing in through the nose. And out through the mouth. Gradually letting it seep out. Retaining lots of that health-giving oxygen as we relax and find calm and peace and serenity. You might even visualize an island in the water, you know, with palm trees. And find your place of solitude, separate from all of the hustle bustle, and find some serenity. Okay, so that's how, hopefully I've given you a few tools anyway to deal with the stress on your daily life And you've been listening to A Path to Wellness on WSPF Digital Broadcasting.